Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon tank, and yesterday I did some preparation work on this tank to get it ready for some new fish I've got in quarantine right now. They're going to move over into this tank tonight, but over time the pH in this tank had come all the way down to around 6, and my quarantine tank was at a pH of about 7.8, and so I needed to bring the pH up in this tank while I was bringing the pH down in my quarantine tank. And so now I've got them just about even. This tank is sitting at around neutral, and the quarantine tank is around 7.3, so there's not going to be much of an adjustment when the fish come into this tank. I will say that I took the pH from 6 all the way up to 7 in about 18 hours just by adding some ground up chicken egg shells and a small handful of a product called poultry grit, which is a combination of crushed aragonite coral and crushed oyster shells. And I threw probably less than a quarter of a cup of the poultry grit in there, and then I threw maybe a quarter to a third of a cup of eggshells in there as well. And you can see that white material. It looks like it sort of snowed in the back of the tank a little bit. Over time that'll work its way down into the larger bits of substrate to the point where you won't even be able to see it. But I did want to point out that that little bit of crushed coral and eggshells has raised the pH by a full point in less than 24 hours, and that is in a tank that has not only this very large piece of woodwork in here, but I also have, it's not as easy to see, but all of this down here, this is a very large piece of woodwork in there too. And so all of that tannic acid that's being produced in this tank, I still brought the pH up a full point just by adding that little bit of, it's the aragonite really that's doing it. From my little experiments that I've been doing lately, the eggshells themselves will raise the pH, and they'll raise it to about the same level that the aragonite will. It just takes longer to get there. The aragonite raises the pH and the hardness very quickly. It dissolves into the water pretty rapidly. So I'm assuming that little tiny handful, and again I'm talking just a little, little tiny bit in the palm of my hand, and that went in the tank. And 125 gallon tank, I've raised the pH a full point already. So anyway, enough of a introductory ramble there. We're actually going to be moving these fish over tonight. I've got two of the Siamese algae eaters. These are not flying foxes, and they are not the Chinese algae eaters, but these are true Siamese algae eaters. And back behind the heater I have a Synodontis Eupterus, or an African featherfin squeaker. Sometimes they're called lace catfish, but we're going to be collecting them up out of this tank and putting them in the big tank here in just a few moments. So sit tight, let me get them collected up. We'll get them put in there. All right, everybody, here we go. Let's see how these work out. Now, the water they're in is tank water, so it's not like I'm pouring them into some different kind of water here. Don't know if you caught that catfish or not, but he went straight to the back. There he is. So that one is probably going to spend a fair amount of time swimming along around the surface. It did the same thing in the quarantine tank until it finally settled on hiding behind the tank heater I've got in there. The Siamese algae eaters, they're fairly active. They swam around the tank quite a bit when it was when they were in the quarantine tank, so I'm expecting to see them out and about pretty regularly. I see one of them down there, but I don't see the other. They usually stay fairly close together. So once they get settled in for a few moments, they get used to being in a new gigantic tank compared to what they've been in. We'll see them get to settle down and start swimming around. So the catfish is still checking out the perimeters, going all around. So lots and lots of places in this tank for this little guy to hide while it grows in. The last one of these that I had was part of my odd couple for my long-term viewers that remember back in the day when I had one of these same catfish in this tank. I had it for about 7 years, I guess, and it finally died. It got sort of bloated, and I never did really figure out exactly what happened to it, but I suspect that it swallowed a little bit of gravel or substrate or something and got some sort of intestinal blockage. That's my best guess. I have no way to identify that for sure, but I think that's what happened to my other Synodontis, because they should certainly live fairly long. Wow, I don't know if you caught that on camera or not, but my gourami there just shot down the length of the tank at lightning speed. I'm glad it didn't come out to the top here. Let me get this lid closed, and then we won't have to worry about that anymore. Now, you will notice, if you look carefully, right between that gourami's eyes, he's got a little boogered up mark. So I can only assume at some point he has dashed himself into something. It's a fairly significant fish, and it's fast. When he darts and dashes and gets startled, it's really, really fast. Have problems with him when the lights come on in the morning. It'll sit there for a few moments. It takes fish's eyes much longer to adapt to changing light than it takes our eyes. So when the lights come on for us, it's instant. You know, stings our eyes and all that kind of stuff. For fish, it's a little bit of a delayed reaction. And it takes much longer for their eyes to adjust, because in nature they don't ever really suddenly get exposed to light. It's, you know, the sun gradually comes up during the day, and so their eyes are not adapted to that sudden change in light. So when you turn the lights on in the morning, sometimes the fish will sit there like nothing's happened, and then 5 seconds later they panic because they've just realized the lights have come on or something. Not all fish do that, and some fish panic as soon as the lights come on. This gourami, however, is one of those fish that when the lights come on, he sits there for several seconds like nothing's happened, and then all of a sudden he dashes like he's in a panic or something, and I'm always afraid he's going to bang into something. I try to turn the lights on fairly slowly. I start by turning the overhead lights on, and then I turn the waterfall lights on, and I gradually work the brightness in the room up, but it doesn't, you know, I mean, I guess it helps, but it doesn't prevent it from happening. I still get the fish dashing around and banging into stuff occasionally. There they are. I'm looking for those two Siamese algae eaters, and I just saw them swimming around right there. There's one of them again. There they are. They are usually within close proximity to each other, so they should settle in nicely. Again, lots and lots of tank for them to live in. And at the moment, I'm not seeing that catfish, but there's my African spotted leaffish laying low, hiding in the crevices down there. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap that video up with the last look at my rainbow fish and my angelfish. So stay tuned. You'll get to see more. Hopefully, there he is. We'll get to watch this little guy grow up, find out whether or not it becomes friends with my Tenopoma, my African leaf fish, and we'll see how they get on. So again, make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss anything I've got coming up. Thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, this one is my 125 gallon tank. Thanks again. I'll see you real soon.